family? Welcome to Brave Talks. My name is Manny, and I'm here with my beautiful wife,
Marlene.
And we are so thrilled today to talk about what I think is kind of a spicy topic, babe.
What's love got to do?
Yep, got to do with it. You heard that?
Singing is not our gift.
That's not.
But
No.
we just kind of tried it.
You love it. Today we're talking about being young and married. And so before you click away or change the pod, if you are somebody that is single, divorced, kind of in the what we call the questionable phase, like you're just talking to somebody perhaps.
This is for you.
This is still for you.
Yeah.
This is still for you.
Hang in there.
Yes. Maybe you need a DTR, define the relationship in your own situation.
Yep.
But Maureen and I are very passionate about relationships. We're passionate about love. We believe that God is love, and as the God that we come from, we want to be conduits of his love, not just romantically to our romantic partner, but also like in fellowship, like in the filial way, like to a brother and a sister. I think that's how you say it, like filio, Philadelphia, filio.
No sé para nada.
Today, we want to be real and open as we have been. This is Brave Talks after all, and talk about our marriage, let you guys in a little bit, hopefully giving you guys permission and bravery to talk about commitment, love, marriage, and other in your own life. So babe, did you always want to get married?
Always.
Talk to us about that.
I've always wanted to get married. I'm going to take a step back. In the last episode, I spoke about being raised by a single mom. And my mom, again, did her best to champion us and protect us and lead us in the way that she wanted to keep us safe, you know? Yeah. But in that, I think I grew up with somewhat an obsession with like wanting to get married one day, to have like my own family. But then also like a huge fear because of what I've seen my mom go through, from abuse to having to leave to me not ever meeting my dad. I just never had a good example as a kid to kind of admire because of what I saw in my life, but also my family. It was rare where I saw a couple that I was like, oh my goodness, until I became of age and started watching telenovelas.
Oh, and she bringing up soap operas, ladies and gentlemen.
Telenovelas was not my blueprint, but it kind of gave me this like hopeless romantic.
It formed you.
It formed me.
Santo.
And it's so funny because Manny has never watched a telenovela. And the glimpse that he gets from like when I used to watch in the beginning of our marriage, he's like, that's why you crazy. Like, that's why you do things you do, because you expect me to show up with like a mariachi band and roses. I'm like, and yes, like
and
I don't expect anything less than that. So I've always wanted to get married. I mean, I used to play with my Barbie dolls when I was younger, and I used to be like, I'm not pronouncing you husband and wife, and you're gonna have kids and live in a house and stuff. So it was just, I think I was desiring a life that I just never had, but I didn't know all that it was going to take for me to be a good wife one day. So yes, I've always wanted to get married. It just wasn't until I was older and I was like, oh my goodness, this is hard and I'm afraid.
That's so good. And we'll talk about that. Wow. So the desire was there since a little girl.
Always, since a little girl.
And I wonder, would you say, is that fair to say for a lot of girls in your life? Like now that are women, but even as y'all talk about, you know, childhood trauma, childhood dreams, that like most of your peers that are women dreamt of being a wife one day?
Yeah, I think we've always dreamt of getting married and having a good husband. I think it wasn't until I became a teenager that it no longer became, I am going to find a man. It was more so, I'm going to find a good man who's going to treat me right. Like it became more of, not a feminist thing, but a very strong, like no one's going to hurt me kind of thing. I'm protecting myself. I deserve so much better. And unfortunately, in my neighborhood and like the way I grew up, even in high school, marriage was never spoken. It wasn't something that we saw in our neighborhood. It's not something that we saw as an example. It was more so, we saw more babies being born than marriages happening. So I no longer dreamt about, like 13 and on, no longer dreamt about having a man. It was more, I wanted a family.
You're going crazy today.
I told you, this is something.
This is babe, you're passionate about this stuff.
I do love it. I do, because I feel like the enemy has been reigning in this category for way too long. And fast forwarding, it wasn't until I found Jesus that God himself was like, this is the purpose of marriage. And that's when I became super, not obsessed, but super intrigued with the idea of what can my marriage look like for me? And I'm going to get into that later on here on where God took me through that journey. But
that was heat. And I do want to also say this caveat too, because we say this a lot. When we say we found Jesus, we're not implying that Jesus was hiding.
Right.
When we say we found Jesus, we're saying it's almost like we realized he was always there.
Yes, and I accepted him and I started following in his ways.
Yeah, chose to follow him. No, I just want to say that because that's common language for us.
Good.
But we want, this podcast is for everybody. And so when we say
that's such a churchy thing to say too. Yeah.
No, but I think that's true of us. It's like when we encounter the living God, our lives were not the same.
Right.
And I think that should happen. It's like, I love what KB says. He says, once you've really seen the Lord, you're obsessed with what you see.
100%.
That you can't look at the eyes of beauty and then look away like nothing happened.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me.
It must change you if it really happened. Anyway.
Yeah.
Babe, you said so many good things. One thing I would love to highlight, if it's okay, you spoke about the desire being there. And then as you became a teenage girl, that desire was almost clothed with defense.
Yes.
That you desired to be a spouse, but as you grew older and you were hurt, and saw this was powerful, saw more babies being born than marriages being committed to.
Yes.
Sheesh. That for you, there was this shift of, it's hard for me to desire what I haven't seen.
100%.
And because you and I, and maybe people listening and watching us in community, also maybe haven't seen like solid marriages, committed, beautiful, flourishing marriages, maybe their desire has turned into defense as well.
100%.
What would you say to somebody, man or woman, listening, watching us, entering our community of brave talks and conversations that are there? They're like, dang, Mar, I hear you, girl. I'm hearing you say, I had this desire, but now because of X, Y, Z, it's turned into defense. And now I'm clothed in defense and my desire is dwindling, or I just feel like it's not for me. What would you say to somebody that's there right now with marriage?
Man, I think, let me think about that. I think what I would say is...
discern it for a second.
Yeah, I think... So God created marriage to be something super beautiful. He created it with good intentions in mind. And I feel like the world and just ugly, ugly sin has covered it. I will say, very simple, don't let a bad apple ruin the bunch. You know, like... I think that goes for everything in life when it comes to experiences and how we allow those things to shape our lives. If I decided at a young age that I was going to be stuck in my bitterness and my fear and my lack of examples around me, I was never going to move forward and create what I wanted for me. And I was never going to move forward with what God wanted for me, which is ultimately the beauty of it all, of marriage and everything. So if you're stuck, especially when you're older, it's easier to say that when you're younger, right? Like 13, 14, 18, 19, whatever. But when you're older and you're in your 30s and 40s and you've gone through divorce and you've been hurt and and there's things that have tainted.
Yes.
Your story isn't over. Your story isn't over.
Oh, that's the word.
Your story is not over. God is not done with you. You are deserving of love. You are deserving of a new life and a new future. And my prayer for you is that you are open. First of all, you go through the healing process, because if you're not healed, you won't be open to receive genuinely true love that will love you for what you desired and deserved from the beginning, right?
Yeah, because if you bring your pain and your trauma and your baggage, there's almost no room for healed love.
Yeah, and honestly, you might still bring your trauma and your marriage, because when we got married, it's not like I was completely healed from the things that I saw.
But you were willing and open.
100%. And the way that you loved me healed me.
Yeah.
Like the way that I was able to be open to your love is what did that for me. Did you always want to get married?
The short answer is no. That's the short answer for a lot of similar reasons.
Right.
And in my own way. And I don't know if some of the men in our community now listening can relate, but I didn't see it. I didn't see good examples of marriage in my life. And I am the kind of person, maybe somebody can relate to this, that I get tired of people and things quickly. Like and this is again surfacing my selfishness. If you and I had fun and we kind of do the same things, and after a while, especially before I committed my life to the ways of Jesus, you know, if I had a sexual encounter with a woman and, you know, we did it a couple times and then I'm like that's it. Like I kind of want something new, something fresh. I had this habit. I trained my mind to move on to the next thing. It's almost like if you weren't giving me something that's exciting and adventurous, I didn't want it anymore. Yeah. Therefore, I didn't want you anymore. So the idea of marriage was not appealing, and frankly, it was scary because.
Is this before Jesus?
Or? Yes. Okay. So most of that was before Jesus. Now, when I had the new worldview and saw, which we'll get to a text in a little bit, in the scriptures, the beauty of marriage, I'll be honest, babe, you know this, I was still scared. I was scared because I still felt like, what if I get tired of my spouse, no matter who she is? I can't be unfaithful. Like that's not an option. I'm not going to be disloyal. But what if I'm miserable because I committed to one person for the rest of my life? And again, I didn't have men in my life yet, affirming and reaffirming. It's part. Easy, hear me. It's easy. I've heard Lecrae say this. It's easy to satisfy different women for one night. It is hard to satisfy one woman for the rest of her life. Think about it that way, of like the challenge of rise to the occasion. Maybe I keep getting tired of people because I don't feel like I'm deep enough to offer enough of me to the same person for the rest of my life. And when I began to do that work, the fear was still there. Fear of commitment, fear of failure was big for me before I proposed to you. But again, I'm thankful, my love, for good mentors. And I want to encourage our community here, get people around you that will speak truth into lies, that will speak love where there's hate or fear, because perfect love casts out fear.
That's it.
And I had that in some mentors of mine, and they just reaffirmed. They didn't tell me anything new. But as I will talk about you, for example, in our dating season, they'll be like, dude, you've never spoken about anyone like this. What's holding you back from taking the next step of commitment? And I would, again, bravery is when you're ready to face danger or pain, showing courage. So I would bravely tell my mentors, like, I'm just afraid that I'm going to fail, that I'm going to get tired. And how do I desire something I've never seen?
Right.
So in short, no, I didn't always want to get married, and it took some good mentorship conversations and frankly, prayer to get to the point of like, not only do I want this, but I think this is for me. I think we should say before we move on, there are people in this world that are called to a beautiful life of singleness.
Yes.
And I hope that that's you listening right now, that maybe, you know, you've forced and you've tried romantic relationships and they just haven't worked out. And you don't have like this burning fire, like the Bible talks about, or a desire to enter into marriage, but because of the pressures of society, even in the local churches of like, this is how you're successful. You got to have a good job, then find a good person, be married, start a family.
Kids.
Like parenting and marriage is not for everybody. It just isn't. And
that ties back into identity as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just here to say, if that's you, no pressure at all, but we do have a brave step even for you to take in your beautiful singleness as well.
Yeah.
So
So we got married pretty young.
We did. Do you want to tell them how old you were?
Yeah, well, I'm 3 years older than you.
Yeah, you are.
And in comparison
Come on, somebody. Holla at your boy.
You know what? In comparison to the world, right? We live right now in Texas, so it's super common for kids to get, or I don't say kids, but young adults.
But kind of.
Right? Like 2021. And that's not common in New York City to get married that young. So I remember when we wanted to get married and our family was like, you guys, what do you mean you're going to get married at 22 and 25? This is kind of crazy. You haven't really lived your life yet. You haven't been with a ton of women. You haven't been with a ton of men. You don't really know what you want. And I'm like, yeah, we do. We know what we want. Because unlike me, so because I'm 3 years older, I'm not saying I had more experience than you. I think I was just exposed to heartbreak so much more at such a young age.
For sure.
Like, when it comes to exposure, I was exposed to so much at a really young age. Not saying I dated a bunch of men, but I did date enough to know what I did not want anymore and enough to know what I wanted in the future, you know? So I'm so thankful. I started walking in the ways of the Lord at 17, and it really affected the way I kind of changed my whole life. I mean, at the time, I was dating a guy who I really loved, and it was more so less about love. It was a young love. It wasn't a godly love. And I was a senior in high school, and it was right before I got saved. And quickly after I got saved, God himself whispered in my heart, like, I have so much more for you. And that in itself was such a huge step for me to let go of something that made me feel so comfortable. But I did. And I feel like I know I reaped the reward, because shortly after I went into like a really good single season. And that's when my whole identity and purpose and kind of like life began for me, because I was able to get rid of the distractions of who I said I was, heal my trauma, heal some things, kind of like confront myself and say,
I like that phrase.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and say, yo, this is what I need to address before I get into a serious relationship. And the next serious relationship was with you. It ended up being a few years later. And again, I love my life now. I love being married and I love being a mom. But those single years for me were so sweet and so important, because I no longer even knew my type anymore. Like, God was really molding me, and I felt like I was in a quiet place with just him, that I didn't flirt with anyone. I mean, even the way you and I got together was just a funny story, because I just wasn't open to that idea. My mom thought I was going to be a nun for like a good time of my life, because I was not content with anything, you know, and God had to
because you were so content with the Lord.
Because
you weren't
I was
like,
content.
Yeah, seeking.
Yeah, it's not like I mean, I could have been a little snobby in the beginning, you know, because I feel like once I figured out who I was and what I was called, nothing.
And you weren't going to settle for.
I wasn't going to settle for anything. And that's rare. I was 17, you know?
Yeah.
And that's like the prime. Like, I'm about to say 18 and do
all
all
your
these
friends
things.
are dating.
All my friends are dating.
It's easy to settle.
Exactly. And again, we didn't have a ton of young marrieds like in our lives until a few years in. And then we started like realizing certain couples in our life that took us under their wings, like Rich and Anna, like people who really loved on us and said, yo, this is what healthy marriage looks like. And it wasn't until later, but.
Yeah, so for us, to go back to the question, so I like that you journeyed us through kind of your first exposure to love romantically when you were in high school, and how that was a good thing for that time. And then when you encountered the Lord, you were like invited to let go of that, and you did. And then singleness was beautiful. And then you and amazing. I became good friends. So our story real quick, really good
what
friends.
What you gonna say?
Well, I just, you know, you can tell it. But we became really good friends first.
We did.
And in our friendship, without any flirting, like you said, I love that I had a lot of flirtatious tendencies still. Like I just, all I knew. And you did a good job of like setting that boundary, which maybe people think that that's like a rejection or a bad thing to do. It's like,
it was a bit of a rejection in the beginning.
Well, I
was very much like,
yeah, but what I'm trying to say with that is, first of all, I think just because you get rejected by something or someone once doesn't mean it's over forever.
Right.
I want to say that. But then two, that rejection, to use that language, was so good for that time.
100%.
Does that make sense what I'm saying?
And for you too.
This is what I'm saying. Yeah, especially for me.
Right.
And I think often, not just romantically, but in general, we feel like anytime we are rejected or denied something, that is because we're bad or because we did something wrong.
Or we're not good enough.
Yeah, it's just not time yet.
Or
Maybe
that's just not a good person.
Yes. And then the danger is when you force it then.
Yes.
No, but it has to be this time or it has to be this person. But
and we've seen that.
We have, sadly. So anyway, there was rejection there from you. I'm like, okay, cool. So, I held the line of friendship and we flourished there. A few months later, you felt like, man, I think I am interested in this kid a little bit romantically.
No, not a few months later.
What was it?
Like when we first met? It was more like in our friendship.
Yeah, I'm talking about a couple years into our friendship.
Oh, a couple years into our friendship.
Then after you rejected me, a few months after that, you were like, wait, I think,
Yeah.
right? I think I do maybe like him a little bit more than a friend. And then we explored that with still really good boundaries. And that was so good because it was so easy.
Yeah.
It's like when you start dating your best friend, it was just fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. There was literally no pressure.
I do have something to say though.
Please.
For those that are listening and have been hurt or kind of misguided when it comes to the whole purity journey, coming out of that is really hard. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get so caught up in like wanting to be this pure person and do these purity things that
When you say pure, what do you mean?
I mean, that's a good question. So for me, it means kind of set apart and just limiting yourself, I guess, to things in the world. Is that like a good definition?
For example, like not having sex until marriage.
Yes, not having sex until marriage. Being
like even
mindful.
like with your speech, like I want to be honoring with my speech.
Yes.
I want to honor my body. I want to honor
I was
others.
exposed to so much as a little girl that my journey of purity was pretty intense. You know, like God, I felt like I just needed to be super set apart. I wasn't in the corner, you know, I was doing life with people, with men included, but I was having really firm boundaries to the point that even like watching TV shows or movies or things like that were not edifying for me in that season. I would look away for sex scenes. I wouldn't even watch movies that if they had certain things that were just exposing me to things prematurely.
Yeah.
I just knew what my body and my mind
your
can
software.
handle.
Yeah,
my
you
software.
knew like eyes are the windows to the soul. Like
Exactly.
if it goes in here, I'm opening a door for lust and perversion. And that's so good.
Yes.
So when you say purity, that's what you mean, like honoring your body, honoring your mind, honoring others.
Yes, but I think when you grow up, like we didn't grow up in the church world.
No, we did not.
We met a bunch of people that grew up in the church world, and then you go from no sex, no this, no that, like these legalistic rules and these really religious tendencies, and then you meet someone and you have to have these hard conversations, and then those things create such a strain in your marriage because you never know how to kind of come out of that.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and that's you, I just want you to navigate that with people that you trust because those conversations are so important. And I do feel like they're casted out and put to the side because there's such a taboo conversation.
Because nobody wants to talk about it. And it's like a lot of marriages that I know of personally, they're struggling in their sex life and their marriage.
Yes.
Because they went from never talking about sex ever to like being expectant to
be a sex animal.
But to
have that exposure.
Have a flourishing sex life with your spouse when you're like, I'm even kind of comfortable saying the word sex.
Exactly.
It's like, we need to do better about that.
And I'm thankful we had that for us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because in full transparency, we weren't,
both of us were exposed to sex before we became Christians.
Yes, we were celibacy when we got saved. We were celibate, right? We were celibate when we got saved. And we waited till marriage.
We did. But both of us have had sex in the world before we met each other, which again, I think in some ways helped us be bold about having the conversation.
Yes.
And then two, seeing the need
from
of
the beginning of like, whatever is even remotely close to this, we're not gonna do it.
That's so good.
Like we're not gonna step in that place. Because we know what it was
like in the world, and we wanted to do it the way that the scriptures taught. And
not only that, I just knew that my job was to honor you.
Good.
My job as your future wife was to honor you, and your job was to honor me. Because hear me say, there's a ton of our friends who did not wait till marriage and have flourishing relationships, have amazing marriages. God has done so many great things in their life. Don't hear me say, if you did this or going
you're disqualified.
through this.
You're not.
No. For us and our journey and who we were and how perverse we were before and how exposed we were to certain things, we needed this intense discipline, and we needed both of us to be like, no.
Because it's a line that we keep coming back to. It's so good. It's like, because we drew the line for each other of honoring one another in that way in a year-long engagement, and then before that, 2-3 years of dating. That we could look back and say, you know, when I'm traveling for work, you don't have to worry because you're like, he held the line for me.
In our dating journey.
In the hardest times too.
In our dating journey. And that created such a security in me as a woman.
Yes.
Things I never saw growing up.
Yes.
But I do remember one of my friends, Christina, saying, yo, I'll be dumb if I think my spouse would never hurt me or fail me, so that I remember her sharing that with me when she got married, and we got married like a little bit after. And that created such not a security in me, but also a very much, because remember, I was exposed to so much. I had such a hard heart when it came to like being treated correctly and all these things. That kind of softened me up a little bit because it made you human to me.
Yeah, it brought you down to earth a little bit and
exactly.
like made it, okay, I see practically, this dude will fail me. But even then, like, and we'll talk about this, but like there's boundaries, like there's non-negotiables, you know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah.
I'm not letting you slide. Anytime we talk about infidelity or anything, I'm like, and he's like, you don't have to remind me that you'll kill me. I said, brother, not even like a little bit. Like those are things that we've had to have conversations in our premarital.
Yes.
Shout out to premarital because that really had us talking about things that were like, oh snap.
Yes.
You feel this way.
Counseling.
Yes, Jesus in therapy.
Yes, counseling, community, and Christ. So to keep the conversation flowing, why did we get married young? Ultimately, we kind of hovered around it, but ultimately, we knew, even at a young age, that if we got married then in our early 20s or in 2 decades in our early 40s, either way, it was going to be a choice that we made every day for the rest of our lives.
Yes.
Does this make sense what I'm saying?
And we were ready for that choice
as ready as you can be. Like we knew that there were things that we didn't know, and still we were willing to do what it took to daily choose one another.
Yes.
And that's what it takes. You got to have the right foundation. We are not experts, but we've gone to counseling. Mm-hmm. We know the scriptures, and then we have, almost a decade. We have a decade together and almost a decade married. And in that time, you just got to choose that person every single day, good, bad, and ugly. So we got married young because we were willing to commit to each other daily. Is that what you would say as well?
Yeah.
And it's been an everyday thing.
Every day.
Every single day.
And the first year was the hardest year.
So hard.
It was such a hard year.
Yeah, you go from choosing yourself every day for your whole life to then trying to choose somebody else.
Yes. And to give them a little bit of insight, we did so much our first year. We moved here.
Yeah.
We moved to Texas. I changed my last name. I changed my community. I didn't know how to drive. There were so many outer things going on in our marriage that affected our inner kind of situation that had nothing to do with us. And so much came up. Even as simple as, is that how you wash the dishes? Or
word.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is that what you do? And it wasn't until much later that those things didn't matter. And you just learn how to honor the other person.
Yeah. And learn how to fight fair. I want to say this.
That part.
If you are in a spot and you're in a relationship of any kind and you want to flourish, but there is like a bumping of heads continuously, I just want to say one, you need to consider, is this worth fighting over? But then two is also considering man, are these external factors that are making us have such crazy discourse and conflict? Or is this, what is this about?
Right.
Is this the thing or the thing beneath the thing? What is this actually about?
How long do you think
it took us a couple years.
It took us a long time because we're
fiery Latinos, first of all.
It's fuego and fuego.
Yes, fuego y fuego. We're passionate. We're both leaders.
Yeah.
We're both headstrong. And we both want things our way.
I want to be loved. You want to be respected. And it wasn't until later that we learned, it's so easy to love you now.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was hard. You were never hard to love.
Yeah.
I think my filter and my trauma, and like I said, just because you've gone through healing doesn't mean that you've been fully healed, caused so much strain and everything else, right? Family, everything.
Yes.
Caused so much strain into our marriage that it wasn't until now, I want to be around you a lot, you know, and vice versa. And it's such a sweet, and even in our crazy season about to have another baby, we just feel connected. We feel like more of a unit where we've seen so many people pull apart because of the lack of sleep. And we've been there. We know what that's like. But leaning on that person became so special. I just love you so much.
Yeah, and I love you. And it takes work.
Yes.
And it takes work.
That's what it is. Would you say the first year and a half was like strictly therapy. Like we needed to have someone
mediate.
Yeah. And we just didn't think that was going to be our first year. But we needed someone to be like, you wrong, you both wrong. This is, Jesus is right. Like, this is what God wants you to say.
Yeah.
And we also, you know what did it for me too? I also had friends who championed our relationship.
We'll get there. That's fire there.
I had friends who championed not only Marlene as their girl, but championed Marlene and Manny because they loved our marriage.
Yes.
And it taught me how to be a champion for someone else's marriage because it's easy. I call up my girl, yo,
this and this happened.
This and this happened. And she's like, I can't believe he did that. I can't believe he... But this is a marriage. Like, it's no longer a relationship where I can go ahead and just talk so nasty about my husband. These are trusted people who will pray for us and not just judge based on like that situation, but champion us. And they say to me, Mar, you were actually wrong. Manny was right in the situation. And you have the same thing for you.
Absolutely. We do. We got to pivot from like cancel culture. Like that is such a big thing still. Like I think people get energy from, he did you wrong, cancel that. Like, and they want things to end. And
because
like
it's love, you know? Like, I love you so much. I don't want you to have to go through that.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have to struggle. I don't want you to have to be brokenhearted. Like, I care so much about my friends that I don't want to see them kind of going through about, like, there's levels to this. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's levels to certain situations that happen. When it passes a specific level, there's this care and this transparency that I, as a friend, will not sit by and say, yeah, let him beat you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like this level. And we're talking about, again, godly marriages or just in general, but...
Yeah, absent of abuse and any of those things that cross the boundaries, and that's all over the scriptures, like... Absent of those things, if we're just saying like you fell out of love or you just can't communicate properly or there's just like, there's disagreements, we're saying, or like there's a lack of long suffering, like you can endure love even in the hard season, which again, that's what bravery is, enduring in danger and pain and requiring courage. What I'm saying is if you're going to be a champion, that means you got to lay down this deep desire to cancel somebody. Is like 100%. If they didn't cross those boundaries where this person's unsafe or whatever it is, keep championing them. Like that's real love. Because we think the grass is greener on the other side, and that's not true. The grass is greener wherever you water it. And so water your marriage if you're married. Okay. Any pros and cons that you would share of getting married so young? I could start if you need to think about a couple.
I got a con already.
Okay, go give me a con.
We were so broke. And then when we started having some type of money, we had kids.
Yeah, so still broke. Yeah, it's like
so
you give it all
still
away.
Broke because we no longer could travel, right? Like in the beginning, we couldn't really travel because we were broke. And now we can't really travel because we need a sitter.
Yeah, so that's so good.
We're broke.
That's
and
good.
There's maturity that comes with being older and getting married and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's a con. But a pro, I had my best friend young, and it's the best thing. We grew up with each other.
I was going to say that. That's the pro and the con, isn't it? Like, if there's so many things that interlap, and the pro is, I've gotten to see Marlene and the metamorphosis of Marlene. Like, the caterpillar into the butterfly. I get to see it the closest. What an honor. Those things are so hard because as we both change, we're like, wait, I just learned how to be with you. I just learned how to respond, how to journey, and now you're changing. But this is good because you're becoming a beautiful butterfly. But now I need to, one, keep changing myself. Hello. But then two, ask the Lord for discernment. Like, how do I best serve you as you change and become who you were meant to be? Yes. It's the pro and the con. It's hard and beautiful.
And I feel like we did a great job. Like, this Manny is not the same Manny I met.
Oh my gosh, no. And that's the hope. And that's what you want. If we're still who we were a decade ago, it's like,
what you doing?
And it just takes that work. So pro and a con, we change and develop, and that's both. I think another pro is we have gotten to like celebrate the wins and losses together in our formative years. And that really does deposit that trust into that bank.
Yes.
Like those seeds of, man, you still riding for me? You still with me? Even though I took this L in this job, or I took this L in my family dynamic, or I took this L. That's huge. Like, really hard times together really form that like strong bond with a couple.
It's amazing.
So I think that's a huge pro.
Yes.
Anything else?
There's a ton of pros.
There's a ton. I mean, and I want y'all, like, in the comment sections to please,
let
like,
us know.
Contribute. What are pros and cons to getting married young in your experience or what you've witnessed? But there's so much.
There is so much.
There's so much. Okay, any fears or concerns?
Well, we spoke about that.
We did.
A little bit in terms of...
Yeah, the fear of commitment, the fear of getting tired of somebody.
Where are you in that right now?
Oh, man. Well, I mean...
Because, my hair is curly regularly. So you got a whole new woman today. My hair is straight for this podcast.
Yes.
So
no, I love
I'll be
it.
switching up. You can't get tired of me.
Yeah, I think you have done an amazing job of just living the adventure with me. Mm-hmm. We've done that, I think, well together. Mm-hmm. We have not viewed each other, at least for long periods at a time, as a burden or like a chore to love, but instead like, okay, this is like a part of my life. One of my roles in life, again, we spoke about identity already, but one of my roles in life is to lay down my life. As a matter of fact, can I read a scripture?
Always.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So this is such a good, fun scripture that Paul writes to the church in Ephesus about like husbands and wives at this time. Mm-hmm. And you can find it in Ephesians 5 and verse 21. He says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Mm-hmm. So first, there's a dual submission. There's like, I will submit and Marlene will submit, but not just to one another, but to Christ. Like there's so many couples that don't have a good foundation. And so instead of pointing at the standard, in our case, we both point to the Bible, what the Bible says about how we should be, about what the Lord has called us to be.
Seriously.
Others can then, if you're not going to point to a standard, who are you going to point to?
Each other. It's true.
You point to each other and you villainize the other as opposed to one pointing at the enemy that hates marriage and saying, we're not going to let the enemy win and destroy our commitment.
I smell it from a mile away. I'm like,
our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the evil spirits, the principalities. Like,
I know that's
there
right.
are evil forces not wanting marriages to flourish. Mm-hmm. But then two, instead of pointing at each other for who's right, you can point at the Lord and say, this is the
right.
standard. This is right. And then now we both get called up to that standard. Mm-hmm. That's the beauty. So just in one verse, I see that glaring. Submit to one another out of reverence for, not just one another, but reverence for the Lord. Mm-hmm. And then it goes on. Wives, submit to your husbands. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives submit to your husbands in everything. And then husbands, love your wives. You were speaking about this. Mm-hmm. Just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her.
Yes.
So, Holy, I'm not going to preach on this for the rest of the pod, but I just want to say we need to stop with this whole machismo, like, man, I'm the man, wife does what I say, and that's how we flourish. That's not biblical. There's the co-submission that we just spoke about with the standard of both beauty and evil that's trying to destroy. And there's this role playing that the wife would say, man, I want to trust you and respect you as the Lord speaks to you. And the husband saying, and I'm going to lay my life down for you to make sure I'm hearing the Lord quickly, to make me worth trusting. Mm-hmm.
And when we do that to each other, it is a joy.
That's good.
For me to submit to you while you love me is a joy. It's a joy to submit to you. Yeah. It's a joy for you to love me when I submit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, it's a joy, and it makes a good marriage.
And it's all submission and sacrifice. If I'm going to love you well, and he says it here, as Christ loved the church, what did Jesus do for us? Died, literally gave up everything. So if husbands are demanding their spouse to submit and they're not laying themselves down,
you better preach.
Fully sacrificing all that they have for their spouse, bro, you ain't doing it.
No.
You ain't doing it.
And you can see it.
Yes. And that's when it becomes abusive.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes manipulative. And that's when it becomes everything that we are saying,
Right.
We're not going to champion those kinds of marriages because that's not biblical.
Right.
Proverbs 18:22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord.
I know that's right.
There's so many reasons why you've been so good for me as a partner, as a spouse. And again, is we were both running in the same direction.
That's it.
And we just had the honor of locking arms and run together.
God is so good to give me you.
Oh, and likewise, my darling. And so for anybody watching this, if you are someone or know people that are running in the opposite direction of somebody that they're trying to be involved with romantically, we're not saying it's impossible for those directions to unify.
It's going to be hard.
We're saying it's going to be really difficult.
In the long run.
Yeah, and even in the short run, like if y'all actually get serious and take it from casual to commitment, it'll get hard because you'll realize if I'm going to commit to somebody, I want to make sure we are running the same way. And that's why we're not going to play with this like, what was my line in that poem, babe? Like, roses and sweets, reposted tweets and under bed sheets. Like, well, we're not going to play that game. Like we're calling the standard of commitment higher to say, yo, if you really love somebody, then you commit to somebody. And commitment is hard, but it is worth it. When's the last time, babe, you did something that was worth doing that was not difficult? Everything worth having is pretty hard to have. Hard. But it
requires work. It requires sacrifice. It requires time. It requires so much.
We could talk so much more about marriage. So why don't you like leave us some comments? Let us know what else you want to hear, because there's so much more that we can say.
Yeah, this can be forever.
Oh my word, yes. And like so many things that we could talk more about our dating relationship. We could talk more about how I proposed. How I proposed to her, why I proposed to her the way I did, why we were engaged for a year. It was mostly because we were broke and we paid for our own wedding. We have so much that we could talk about this, and we're passionate. If you want to hear more about sex, dynamics of marriage, how we champion others, please let us know in the comments, because we would talk about those things. Love to talk about that in future eps. So, brave step. What's a brave step that you can take as a single, as a married, as somebody that maybe is in the talking phase with someone, somebody who's been divorced, and you're just hurt and disillusioned right now, maybe in a relationship? I want to tell you, would you be somebody that comes alongside a couple and champions them? If the couple is, by biblical standards in our worldview, flourishing, doing things right, like doing their best to honor one another and themselves, champion them. We all need somebody. We know it takes a village to raise kids, but it takes a village to have a healthy relationship.
Yes.
It really does. And so would you be that for a couple? And you championing them may also be you encouraging them to go their separate ways because they're dying inside. Let's be quick to forgive this week. Be quick to have a conversation. Maybe you are in a relationship and you're like, man, I've been putting off a conversation with my spouse. This is your sign. Have the conversation. Be quick to forgive and be a champion this week. Anything else?
Yes. We all need someone to lean on.
That's right. All right, that was your brave step. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace.